Serious concerns about a popular over-the-counter medication,
also known as polyethylene glycol 3350.
Glycol 3350.
The laxative is causing neurological and behavioral problems in children.
Anger, aggression, even seizures.
Like a switch that was flipped, and their once happy, laughing children turned angry and dark.
Paranoia, mood swings, aggression, rage.
He couldn't sleep. He was having night terrors.
It was horrifying.
Anxious and paranoid.
He was punching kids for no apparent reason.
Angry and aggressive.
Pediatricians prescribe it like water. Same ingredients found in antifreeze. Hospital says they can't comment because the study is incomplete.
I wanted to kill everybody.
This was a drug-induced toxic psychosis.
I think they're poisoning our children.
Please call 911. Where's your emergency? I shot my father. Is he breathing? No, he's dead. I shot him twice in the chest.
This is Poison, a closer look at polyethylene glycol 3350. I'm your host, Wilfredo Manzano.
This is episode 2, Anne's story.
Thursday is the day the tragedy, as I call it, happened. Thursday was a very busy day for me. My son came home with carpool, and I was at home, and I had to go to a meeting that night, and my husband had been out of town, and he had just come home, and my son was very happy to see him. I was very happy to see him, and I said, I just have to go to a PTA meeting for about an hour, and I left about, my husband said, well, I'll go get Warren something to eat. You don't have to worry about dinner. So my husband did go get my son some kind of fast food. I'm not sure what. I remember there was a burger and a soda wrapper, large soda that was still full on the countertop. But I went to my meeting and I left, and they were outside very happy, walking our 2 dogs, just walking around our property. We had an acre and a half, and they just seemed like they were enjoying everything. And I came back an hour later, and there was crime scene tape and policemen, and my son had shot and killed my husband. I actually did not have my cell phone with me. I was just gone for an hour and realized I had left it on the kitchen table and thought I won't be gone for long at all. So I guess Warren did try to call me, but he was not able to reach me. So then he called 911.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Is he breathing? No, he's dead. I shot him twice in the chest. I do not believe he's breathing.
Why did you shoot him?
I don't know. I really don't know.
They just said your husband's been shot and by your son, and he's dead. That they had removed him from the premises. They had taken him to jail. They did their very best to isolate him from me. Yes, they did not want me to see him. But that morning, he went to school. Everything was fine. One of his very good friends was in the carpool, and he wrote a letter, actually, to the judge and talked about Warren and how much Warren loved his dad and what a nice father Warren had, and that his father was always concerned about their safety and what happened that day, and that Warren was just a normal kid, but that he knew that Warren had been very sad after his brother had died, but that Warren seemed to have dealt with it well and seemed to be okay, and that day that his mother dropped Warren off at our house, that Warren just seemed very happy that he was okay. So he was in the car with Warren and said they talked about normal things that day, and that he never would have imagined Warren could have done anything as violent as shoot and kill his father. And Warren even said that afterwards. He said, I've never been angry at anyone enough to ever harm them. But he did. I certainly suffered from shock at the loss of our first child. And certainly the loss of my husband is shocking enough. And then to lose my husband by the hand of my son is doubly shocking. And I spent night after night after night reading medical journals, abstracts from medical journals, trying to figure out what possibly could have happened to my child. Because I knew something, I did not know what, but something had gone wrong. And the police actually took possession of my house. I was not allowed to go into my house for 3 weeks. And I do remember when I returned to my house, the order for the Miralax, the prescription, and they had given me a protocol about how he was supposed to be on Miralax for the next 6 to 12 months, and his bowel was going to shrink, and he needed the Miralax every day. And I remember pulling it off of the refrigerator and throwing it in the trash, and never once did I think, you don't think a laxative can do this to someone. My son was an artist, and he painted, and he had paint cans in his room. And I went in there and I thought, could he have sniffed some paint? He's a middle schooler. Could he have ever wanted to do something crazy like that? Could that have made his thinking so crazy that he would shoot and kill his father? I mean, I was beating my head against a wall. I could not understand any of it. None of it made sense. My husband was just a wonderful, wonderful man, and in the interrogation, we were able to watch a tape in the courtroom at a later date, and they asked my son, they said, did your parents beat you? And I remember my son looking at them like, no, of course my parents didn't beat me. And he said, no. And he said, did you get along with your parents? And he said, well, yeah, like most teenage kids, I get along with my parents. And then, do you get along with your father? And he said, yes, I get along with him. And at one point, my son even said, is my dad okay? And that was rather shocking to hear my son ask, was his father okay? Because that makes you know something was not right at the time that he had called 911 and said, I shot and killed my father, he's dead. And then hours later, he's asking, is my father okay? As a nurse, as I started to put the pieces together, and it literally took me 8 months to figure out what happened to my son, I believe that there is a state of homeostasis meaning balance, that the body is in normally. And when something, whether it's bad diet, medication, an illness, attacks that homeostasis and puts it off kilter, then the body does its very best to return to homeostasis. So I think that my son was in a state of homeostasis when the first bit of Miralax was given, or the large amount. He got almost 30 doses, almost a month's worth of Miralax for an adult in less than 6 days. Each day, his body would try to rectify itself and reach balance and reach it and be okay, and then we would poison him again. His body would be just jolted into this state of metabolic acidosis, which is what the FDA says. Metabolic acidosis can cause this. They put Warren in a juvenile facility initially, and he was in a juvenile facility. My mom and I were able to go visit him. Of course, I didn't. The really awful thing about this is I remember taking the Miralax and taking it to the juvenile jail and banging on the door and begging them to give him his Miralax. I said, he's going to get constipated. You don't know how important this is. So, of course, I didn't put it together that the Miralax was causing it. I was poisoning him. He continued to be poisoned after he was arrested. It's shocking when you think about it. I still have the bottle of Miralax with his name, and it says DJJ, Department of Juvenile Justice, and to take 1 scoop a day. Yeah. So of course he was still under the influence of the drug. So he continued to be very, The only word I can think of is dark. He had these dark circles under his eyes. He didn't act normal. He was kind of shifty. He just was weird. And I had a friend who also, from Boy Scouts, her son was in Boy Scouts with my son. She was a counselor who visited the juvenile justice system. And she called me one day because she was responsible to give me an update on my son. And I don't think she wanted me to know it was her. So we all called her Liz. And of course, there's no way to explain the state of shock that you're in. You're on autopilot for days on end. You can't sleep for days on end. Nothing, it's as though everything that you're taking in is going through all these filters that continually mute and quiet down things so that your body can take them in slowly. That your body is so overwhelmed with just the cortisol and the hormone level that's so high. So I talked to her for a long time, and finally she was telling me all about Warren and this and that, giving me what he did during the day, very a scripted conversation. And finally I recognized her voice, and I was trying to tell her, this is not the boy that you're seeing. And finally she said something like, I know. And I said, all of a sudden it hit me. I said, Liz, is this you? And she said, yes, Ann. And I said, oh my God, you know Warren. What do you think? And she said, the little boy I'm seeing right now is not the Warren that I know and love. She said, it's not him. So we just ended the phone conversation. I mean, we obviously knew the Warren that had shot and killed his father was not the Warren that any of us knew. But for her to say that, in retrospect again, he was on Miralax. That's why. So 3 weeks later, he was, there was a grand jury, which we had no input into, and the prosecutors painted Warren as this horrific killer and said, we want him sentenced as an adult. We believe this is an adult capital crime, and that's how he needs to be sentenced.
On the same day Bill Williams would have celebrated his 57th birthday, his son accepts a 20-and-a-half-year sentence with 15 years of probation to follow. It was all part of a plea deal.
He was indicted by the grand jury on charge of first-degree murder. That charge carries a sentence of mandatory life in prison.
But then came the insanity defense.
We determined that there was a substantial amount of psychiatric and psychological issues that were occurring, as well as the fact that he was 14 at the time the crime occurred. A crime that shocked the Gulf Coast.
Well, the judge in the case recommended Williams be held in a juvenile facility until he's 21, but the Florida Department of Corrections will make the final decision.
So we want him prosecuted as an adult. And that day, he was transferred over to the adult jail. And I went over that day with Miralax and asked to speak to whoever would be in charge, and they gave me the mental health director. And I told him my son needed to be on Miralax, and he said, I'm sorry, only the doctor makes the decision of what medicines a child, anybody here in the prison can take, or not the prison, the jail. And I was very disappointed, and he said to me, I can't believe they sent this little boy over here. I never in a million years thought they would send him here. He said, they might as well have thrown him in a dungeon and thrown away the key, because that's what it's like here for a child. He said, it's inhumane. So that was the first day that Warren did not get, or he may have gotten Miralax that morning, but that was when Warren started to turn the corner and return to himself, when he was no longer getting the Miralax. Well, they had you in a school desk, and the desks were pointed to one another. And I was able to reach across the desk, and I was able to hold his hand. And all that I said is, Warren, I said, I do not know what happened. I said, I do not know why you did this, but I said, I want you to know that I love you very much. And I want you to know that the best way that we can love and honor your father is how we go forward from here. And I saw his sweet little shoulders just drop. And I saw such relief because I could see in his eyes, and he knew from looking in my eyes, that I did not blame him for what he had done. Now, again, I did not know why he had done this, but I knew that there was something terribly awry for him to do it. They told us we were not allowed to ask anything, but I will tell you, being the loving, understanding mother that I am, and going through shock and understanding that Warren was also very devastated and very much in shock, I would not have asked him that. But my mother, I think, did ask him at one point, when she had time with him, do you know what happened? And she said the only thing he said to her was, it was an accident. And that's pretty much what he said to her. So that's what she has shared. Well, the current status is Warren is still a delight. He has many friends who visit, many supporters. He is in prison. He's been incarcerated for 9 years. He was sentenced to 20.5 years. He's just a great kid. He's a young man now. He's grown up in prison. All of the people who interacted with him in prison, meaning chaplains and guardsmen and guards and counselors, every single one of them loved him, dearly loved him. He did very well in the juvenile facility. He thrived once he was off Miralax. He was so funny because once I figured out what it was, he didn't want to talk about it very much to me, because my feeling is he has to cope now that he's locked up. And if I started to grasp that a medication had made me crazy enough to shoot and kill my loved one, I would be very angry about it. I would be very upset about it. And in order for him to cope and maintain his very, very positive attitude, he does not venture down that path. But he has been very positive and told me, Mom, Miralax is your bag. That's what you're doing. It's your deal, and I support that. But he said, I really don't want to talk about it. So, but interestingly enough, he has tried to wean other kids off of other medications in the juvenile facility, and he's called me for my advice. So he knows that medications can cause quite a few problems. And he has said, I will never drink and I'll never do drugs. He's quite frightened by them, as anyone would understand. Another young boy who had been prosecuted in Jacksonville, again in the state of Florida, and they tried to sentence him as an adult, but 4 attorneys in Jacksonville got very involved. And when they met Warren in the juvenile facility during visitation, they became quite interested in his case. And they really wanted to help Warren because they did not feel like Warren deserved to be in the juvenile facility. They felt like he was a well-adjusted kid and it was not the right place for him. And I'll add also that Christy Daly, who was the secretary of the Department of Juvenile Justice, visited Warren's facility at one point, probably around the time he was 15 or 16, and the administrator asked if Warren would give her a tour of the facility. And Warren spent the whole day with her. And at the end of the day, she went into the facility administrator's office and she said, I don't know what this young boy is in here for, but he does not need to be in here. And at that point in time, the facility administrator told her what he had done. And she said, well, I'm going to do my very best to get him out of here by the time he's 19. He does not need to be in prison. It was obvious to her that she was able to ascertain that he was a well-adjusted, nice young man. And I will also add that the diagnosis of bipolar was labeled on him. The attorneys that were supposed to defend him wanted to use that, and I was quite upset by it because initially in the first week, I thought perhaps he has a mental illness that has never manifested. But as time went on, and once the Marilac stopped and Warren returned to his normal self, I thought there is nothing in the world wrong with this child. So he did go down to the juvenile facility with a bipolar diagnosis, and they took that diagnosis off within 6 months, realizing very quickly that there was nothing wrong with Warren. So adding insult to injury, it was bad enough that Warren had to deal with what he did, and then they're trying to tell, the lawyers that we hired are trying to tell him he's mentally ill. And there's nothing about Warren that says he's mentally ill. I mean, I would not have any problems acknowledging if I thought there was a mental illness, but there's not. I am embracing the truth, and the truth is Warren suffered from a substance-induced toxic psychosis, and Marilac was the substance, and that's as simple as it gets. Warren was quite manipulated, as you can imagine. He was only 14, by the attorneys. And once I hired the attorneys, and I spent close to $350,000 to hire 2 very good attorneys, or at least I thought they were very good till I had to deal with them. As soon as they got their money, and criminal defense attorneys you have to pay up front, they turned to me and told me I was no longer involved in the case, that I was no longer their client. So they interacted solely with my son, and they did their very best to exclude me from all interactions, and I actually had to find my own attorney to interact with those attorneys, if you can imagine such a thing, such a travesty. So a son loses his best and closest advocate. Now, the attorneys would probably tell you they were his best advocate, but I can tell you they were not. Their goal was to move his case through as quickly as possible and be done with it and have as little work as possible. And most attorneys will tell you preparing for trial is quite time consuming, and they don't want to do it. So they achieved their goal. They convinced Warren that he needed to accept a plea deal, which, by the way, the first plea deal was for 25 years. And after they left the cell, telling him, they went in and they told my son, you better take this plea deal or you could spend the rest of your life in prison. And when they left, my son was able to call me and he said, Mom, they made me sign a plea deal. And my remark to him was, did you want to? Did you want to sign that plea deal? And he said, no, Mom, I didn't. And I said, well, I didn't intend for you to sign a plea deal either. I would never have spent that kind of money on attorneys. I expect them to take you to trial. I believe that you deserve a trial. And he said, okay, I'm good with that. Are you good with that? And I said, absolutely. I had no intentions of you signing a plea deal. So 2 days later, they went back with another plea deal for 20.5 years. And do you know what they said to him when they walked out of the cell? Don't go crying to mommy this time. Now, if that had been an adult, one adult would never speak to another adult like that. But that just gives you an idea of how awful it is that we are incarcerating children in adult prisons and treating them as adults because the crime in their estimation is an adult crime. Their minds are not developed. Judgment is not developed until about age 25. So obviously juvenile justice has become another passion of mine. Warren was 15, and the day he was sentenced would have been my husband's 56th birthday, I believe. His birthday. That was the day the trial was supposed to start.
Poison features the stories and opinions of parents who have seen firsthand adverse reactions to using products containing polyethylene glycol 3350 and is told week by week with new episodes every Tuesday. We'll also have some professionals on future episodes who can shed some light on the topic.
This episode of Poison was edited by Daniel McLennan and Wilfredo Manzano.
Thank you for listening to Poison. Please make sure to subscribe and rate us on iTunes and leave a review. If you'd like to share your story with us, visit our website at poisonpod.com.